Hello, my ad age insiders. Happy Friday. I have another great marketing story for you this week. It's February 6th, and we're going all in on Super Bowl, the Olympics, and the marketing trends defining sports' biggest moments this year. That includes how to make a timeless Super Bowl ad. This is Ad Age Insider, where I'm going behind the scenes of the industry's biggest stories with the reporters who actually wrote them. I'm your host, Parker Herron. Make sure to hit follow wherever you're watching so that you're never behind on industry news. So this week is a super busy one for sports fans. The opening ceremony for the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics is this evening, February 6th, and you're likely getting together your snack menu for Super Bowl Sunday this weekend. Brands have poured tens of millions of dollars into this stretch of events, and they're probably sweating it out a little bit right now, wondering whether their ad will be the talk of social media tomorrow. That could be for good or bad reasons, or even worse, if it doesn't make any impact at all. So today, I called up Tim Nudd, Ad Age's creativity editor, and John Springer, our senior sports and marketing reporter. They're going to break down what separates the Super Bowl ads you probably know every line to versus those that just get lost in all the noise. That includes what ads they predict may hit classic status this year, plus whether we're finally going to hit the AI slopification of Super Bowl marketing, why some brands are choosing to back athletes over traditional ad spots, and more. Let's get into it. Hey, John and Tim, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah. Hey, Parker. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, John?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Tim, how are you holding up on the Friday before the Super Bowl?
Surviving. It's been a long week, but, it's been fun to see the spots as they come out.
Yes. And that's a great way into my first question for you. Let's lay the groundwork. We have seen some of the Super Bowl ads so far as we're recording the week before the Super Bowl, before the Olympics opening ceremony, which is this evening on Friday, February 6th. And there are some that we have seen that we cannot talk about, and there are some that we have not seen. So, John, Tim, what percentage of the Super Bowl ads do you think you've seen so far?
Well, I believe it's about high 20s that are actually public already, so that everyone has been able to see them. As you mentioned, we've seen a few more, so we're tipping over half, and many more to come.
Yeah. So y'all have your work cut out for you this week. John, I wanted to start with you. We're going to jump straight in to decoding some marketing trends across the Super Bowl and the Milan Cortina Winter Olympics that are just getting kicked off at the exact same time. Dig into what marketers can learn from the work that is being displayed on some of the biggest event media broadcasts of the year. So, John, kick us off. What is the first trend that's standing out to you among the work you've seen so far for either the Super Bowl or the Olympics?
I mean, for me, it's, athletes as creators, athletes as little mini brands in and of themselves. We saw a lot of that at Paris over the last summer, and going into the Winter Olympics. It's maybe even more pronounced in that there are seemingly a lot of these kind of obscure sports. One of the people I've seen on my FYP is a skeleton rider named Gracie, who's been taking us through her training runs and the tour that they do before they get in there. But among the other things that she's done is mention how much it costs for an athlete to participate in these things. They get, I was fascinated to learn this. They get charged per run. So you do a training run, you go down this slide 80 miles an hour. That's a charge to do that once. Do it twice. It's twice as expensive. And so these athletes, they rack up a lot of their own expenses, and there's only so much that the governing bodies can do to sort of make that up. So then they go to, brands and do this kind of content online, and that kind of gets attention. They get bigger audiences. They get more brands to support them. So we're seeing a lot of that, apparel brands, outdoor brands, especially kind of been, supporting the athletes. But that's one trend I think that's out there this year for marketers.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do one of those sled runs for free, so I can't even imagine being charged that much. Why are brands doing that? What is kind of the lesson in what sponsoring a specific athlete rather than just like tossing an ad up in an ad break during the Olympics, what does that do for marketers?
I think it sort of signal. I hate to use this word because marketers use it all the time, and I don't try to get it in my stories. Authenticity. I think that
Mm.
matters, and I think with that sort of one-to-one, connection between the athlete and their fans out there, I think that's a very natural way for a brand, especially when it's a good fit. Like I said, a skier with a outdoor apparel brand, that makes a great fit, and for that. And I think, in the bigger picture, I think sports fans have become more and more curious about the athletes themselves and less so about the teams they play for. Maybe not less so, but the idea of athlete becoming more prominent. I go to New York Mets games, and they put up on the scoreboard. They put up their batting average. They put up how many home runs they've hit. And last year, for the first time, they started putting up their hometowns. My brother and I go to the games. That always never fails to start conversation with us. What do we know about Lincoln, Nebraska? All this stuff. So, and it seems like brands kind of tapped into a fan energy there and a curiosity about the athlete that wasn't necessarily apparent in the old days.
Yeah, yeah, and absolutely, as you said, taking brands across platforms with the athlete rather than just being on TV. Tim, what's a trend you're seeing? I know you're especially tapped into Super Bowl this year. What's something that's sticking out to you among the work you've seen so far?
Well, first I'll say it's a little crazy that the opening ceremonies and the Super Bowl are 2 days apart. Whoever scheduled that,
Yes.
please don't do that again. As far as Olympics go, I just tagging on to what John was saying, I think in a lot of the marketing we've seen from the brands so far, it's not a new trend, but it's kind of a tried and true thing, which is focusing on the support system behind athletes, so their families primarily. This goes back to P&G, Thank You Mom, years ago. It's a very common strategy, but we've already seen it for brands like Hershey's, they did a video that was quite cute where families kind of surprised the athletes with kind of old videos and things. And then the Visa campaign with Michaela Schifrin and Oksana Masters really focuses on that campaign from Anomaly, really focuses on family and the support. It's not really, the messaging is it's kind of about the journey, and success can mean different things as long as you have that support behind you. So that's what I've seen thus far, I think, with a lot of the Olympics. And then
Mm.
Super Bowl, honestly, I think it's escapism, escapism, escapism. Like, I think we've been saying this for a few years now, but the world is in a really weird place. The Super Bowl is there to make you feel good, to have a good time, to be entertained. Maybe we'll see a few more serious ads, but so far we've just seen kind of goofy, fun-loving stuff. And one other trend I've seen is some Hollywood auteurs kind of in the game as directors. So Yorgos Lanthimos has 2 ads in the game, one for Grubhub, one for Squarespace. And Spike Jones has made his return to the Super Bowl for the first time in 20 plus years, and his ad is for Instacart. So some craft, some comedy. Time will tell if there's anything more political happens.
Yeah, I'm interested to kind of bridge the gap between all of the trends y'all just spoke about. In the Super Bowl, I feel like more than ever, it is just like celebrity palooza, and the majority of the ads I've seen are just celebrities out the wazoo, as they say. And I feel like I've seen a real like spectrum of, okay, this ad is like really tapped into this celebrity's persona. Something like the Kendall Jenner Fanatics work, I think sticks out for that. And then there are some ads that I'm just like, well, here's just a little roster of headshots just like flowing past me. What are you seeing about celebrities this year, Tim or John, and why is there such an emphasis on that? Is it similar to why brands are sponsoring athletes at the Olympics, or are we just like really doing everything we can to get a celebrity in an ad?
I mean, I think it depends on the case by case basis. I think I was thinking when you were talking about some of the ads that I had written about so far, and Budweiser doesn't have a celebrity unless you consider the horse a celebrity, and he carries all these sort of quality American, kind of quality, and that helps that brand. Bud Light, on the other hand, had Post Malone with Shane Gillis, and I'm less sure sometimes what Post brings to the broadcast, but Shane Gillis was made for Bud Light.
Yeah,
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 I'm not.
you're forgetting the eagle as well as the horse.
Oh,
Like
of
really, like
course.
I mean, of all the celebrities, bald eagle, pretty big to get for that ad.
It's funny you
Sorry, go
should
ahead,
say
Tim.
that. It's funny you should say that about the horse. I spoke to an editor once who cut the Volkswagen Darth Vader ad, and I said, "What was it like not having a celebrity?" And he's like, "Of course there was a celebrity. It was the Star Wars music." So, like, if you have a a recognizable asset, it doesn't have to be human to be a celebrity. I mean, listen, yeah, celebrity soup is very common in these Super Bowl ads now, and a good litmus test is take a step back and does it have to be that person or could it literally be anybody else? If the answer is it could be anyone else, the agency is not really doing their job. But there's been a few ones, I thought the Sabrina Carpenter Pringles ad was cute because it does play off her public persona of being frustrated with boys and so on. I thought that was kind of neat. And then the Squarespace campaign, which I really love. This one this year, Emma Stone is in that. Yorgos Lanthimos directed it, and believe it or not, it's based on a true story that she couldn't get emmastone.com because another Emma Stone had the domain. And if you've seen the spot, which came out a couple days ago, she tries to load the page and she just has this sort of epic meltdown, breaks the computer, throws it across the room. She does this repeatedly in the ad. And so I think, if you have a true story involving a celeb, great. And if you have one that really, commits to the performance, wonderful. But too many ads these days are really just, a celebrity instead of an idea, which is never really a winning strategy.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the question that never ends these days, a little bit about AI. And the reason I want to bring AI up is not anything I felt as I was watching the ads, although there's one in particular that comes to mind. But I've received a huge number of email pitches asking me if I want to talk to experts about AI in the Super Bowl and this idea of this being the first real test of consumer capacity for AI in marketing and warning that there will be this sea of AI slop. And I was kind of like, interesting, like, do you have more information on what you're referencing here? But I'm not watching nearly as much work as the two of you are. So, what are you seeing for the Super Bowl this year in the realm of AI?
I am not seeing any AI slop, and I'm not sure who's emailing you exactly. Maybe it's execs from AI companies just wanting to talk about themselves. No, I think there's been a real backlash in the last few months to generative AI and the uncanny valley and just the grossness of it. I haven't seen really anything so far. I think some ads will touch on AI for sure. OpenAI will be in the game. We don't know what that spot's going to be yet. Google is in the game. They've been promoting Gemini a lot recently, so there may end up being some, generative AI. I wouldn't expect any sort of slop in the game because marketers are going to realize that that's a losing proposition at the moment. So yeah, I don't think this Super Bowl will be really any different than the last few in terms of that. AI is a topic, but not a lot of generative AI as the product in the game.
I mean, we saw the Svedka ad, which came out a couple of days ago, made entirely, they say, of AI. But the brand would tell you that it made sense because Svedka has been a future-focused brand for many years, and that this is sort of the right place for them with a robot and AI or whatever. And it's a fun ad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Svedka ad is a little different because it's essentially like animation, and so it's AI in that context is kind of just a souped-up form of CGI. So where AI gets weird is when you try to animate real people, and these are robots that they sort of look like people, but they're clearly not meant to be people. And so I think it's a little different. Once we see a human like with six fingers or whatever in the Super Bowl, I think it'll be a sad day.
Yes. Well, a sad day for me discovering that the Fimbot is not real and that I might not encounter her, at my local bar. And if you're listening to this and you're one of the at least 10 people who have emailed me about this, stop emailing me. I do want to take a little bit of a serious note here and discuss the cultural environment in which the Super Bowl is occurring this year. I'm specifically referring to the deployment of ICE in American cities, the killing of American citizens by ICE agents, and the nationwide protests of this activity that we've been seeing. That is the cultural setting for these sporting events that we're talking about today. But it's also a topic within these events as well. Conservative groups have protested Bad Bunny headlining the Super Bowl halftime show. Bad Bunny was very vocal about ICE during the Grammy Awards last weekend. And I expect there will also be statements and gestures made throughout the Olympics as well. Our colleague Adrian Pasquarelli wrote a really awesome story about how brands are discussing and approaching this, specifically around the Super Bowl. But I just wondered, as maybe brands are strategizing and thinking about what to say, what not to say, whether their ad is really matching the tone of the national climate right now. Are y'all hearing anything from advertisers you're speaking to about this topic?
Well, Parker, I wrote about World Cup, and I spoke to any number of experts and brands, and word seems to have gotten out. They all had a similar sort of message, and that message is, this event is going to bring people together. We're not concerned about this, but they say that, and since then, with the situation with Greenland and Trump's comments there, Germany has talked about sort of pulling their teams out of the World Cup. That would be a huge, you know, economic damage to the event that's happening in the U.S. And with the Summer Olympics coming to Los Angeles in a couple of years, that could happen as well. Now, like I don't know the progress of those talks or whatever, but I feel like the brands, to the extent that they sort of have a plan, I'm sure they do, but they're not talking about it yet.
Mm.
I think if anything that we learned from the pullback from DEI, I think it's pretty clear that companies aren't really in the mood to be political. And Super Bowl in particular is usually not the place to be political, or that brands are comfortable being political. That's not to say that something couldn't happen. I mean, I think the Bad Bunny being the halftime performer is really interesting, and I think that could end up being a talking point politically at the end of the night. I don't expect many brands to really wade into that. You may end up hearing some more general messages around how it's good to be, neighborly and friendly, and a good positive influence in your community. There's several spots I think that are going to touch on that. But that's just sort of, that's basic being a human being. That's less about ICE, and it's less about what's actually happening in the country. So, the counterpoint to that is occasionally you'll have a marketer who sees an opportunity there when no one else is talking about something that really is a reality for so many people. Some brands will sometimes come in and say something about that. Chrysler years ago being the key example, 2011 or 12, they had several spots in the game that kind of addressed difficulties in the country in a very creative way and in a very memorable way. I think that broke through for them. It's we're 15 years removed from that, and the political environment is a lot different now, and it's just very difficult for any brand to wade into those issues without experiencing problems on one side or the other. So I think primarily Super Bowl is going to be about escapism, as I said, and it'll be a real surprise if any brand says anything pointed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll definitely keep an eye on that and the consumer response as well to some of this. I want to pivot a little bit from there and talk about a piece of feedback that, Tim, we've talked about before actually on this very podcast, but that I'm curious your State of the Union on. I hear a lot about people saying this Super Bowl ad from 10 years ago is a classic. I love it. But the past 2 or 3 or 4 Super Bowls, absolutely nothing. I couldn't make heads from tails on some of these ads. What do you think the first, your responses to that feedback that like no new Super Bowl classics are being made anymore?
I get that. I get that criticism. I think part of it is overblown because people are naturally nostalgic for everything in their life, not just for Super Bowl commercials. But everything was probably better 10 years ago for almost everybody than it is today. But listen, there's always great work on the Super Bowl. I think the celebrity soup that we were talking about before has made it, a little bit harder to find in the game. I think too many spots are created by committee, and you lose a lot when that happens. But there's always a handful of ads that are great. I will say, I think what's been a little bit lacking in the last couple Super Bowls is a really clever idea. There's been a lot of great craft. Last year I think we chose the Nike "So Win" spot as our favorite of the game. I wouldn't characterize that ad as a great idea necessarily. It was just really wonderfully executed, well written. The idea was fairly basic, and I would have to go back to something like "It's a Tide" ad from 7-8 years ago. to really think, or even like the bouncing QR code for Coinbase, like something really different, either really clever, really unexpected. You don't get a ton of those where the idea really stands out. You do get a bunch where they're funny, they're well made, but to really break through, I think you need that extra sort of really special idea, and those ideas are at a premium for sure.
Yeah, John, what do you think?
I mean, it seems like, those ideas like Tim talked about, once they kind of take hold, and many of them took hold in a time when the media environment wasn't so fragmented, and it's more, I think it's more difficult probably to kind of establish a lasting, iconic sort of idea anymore. Again, I go back to the brands that I kind of follow. Budweiser, it's got the horse. Bud Light tried for years ago to be something else. They, ended up getting punished for that, and they've gone back to sort of their classic humor. Michelob Ultra is going to be a lighthearted take on sports year after year after year with a celebrity year after year,
You know,
and it works for them. But so I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing a little bit less sort of truly original things.
I think also that you have to remember too that the actual in-game Super Bowl commercial is a smaller piece of the larger puzzle now for all of these brands. Something like CeraVe from a year or two ago. I think that was a couple of years ago now. The whole environment of that marketing, the whole sort of different beats and different formats and places that lived. The in-game spot was only a piece of it. So I think you have to look at the whole kind of ecosystem in which a brand is operating around Super Bowl. And not to go back to Squarespace again, I'm not on their payroll, but I think that their extra spots around the game are just so fantastic, and they're very different than what the in-game commercial is. And so, when you expand the messaging for different formats, different places, whether it's social media, or Squarespace has a spot on emmastone.com, and that's the only place where it is, just for people who type in the URL during the game. It's a wonderful piece. And so when you look at all, across the board, I don't think there's as much pressure on the actual in-game commercial to perform as there used to be. Not to say that it shouldn't be great. It should be great if you're spending 9 million on it, but there's a much wider aperture to kind of I think view these things through.
Yeah, yeah. And Tim, I will be looking for bank statements from you to prove that Squarespace has not sponsored you. So you mentioned that one element of a classic Super Bowl ad is a really original idea, something that moves you. Are there any other defining traits that y'all would say are common across ads you would consider kind of timeless Super Bowl ads?
One thing that I really think works on Super Bowl is if an ad that recognizes that it's in the Super Bowl and kind of has fun with that reality, because then everyone watching can kind of share in that moment. It's not an ad that can run a week from now, or it's not an ad that could have run a week ago. I think the classic example is the E Trade Monkey, where I think this ran in the 2000 Super Bowl, where it was 30 seconds of a monkey dancing on a tub. And at the end, it said, "We just wasted $2 million. What are you doing with your money?" Not an ad that could run anywhere else. It was tailor made for the Super Bowl. I think when you hit that sweet spot of having a funny, engaging, entertaining, 30 or 60 seconds that's really just defined for that moment, it can blow up bigger than if it's more generic than that.
Yeah. I would love if you could each put on your predictor's hat for a moment. Are there any ads you've seen so far this year that might check the boxes of the criteria you have laid out so far for a timeless Super Bowl ad?
I don't know about an all-time classic. I think the Budweiser spot, John, is probably going to do very well. It's formulaic, but it's irresistible at the same time. I've spoken about Squarespace too much, so I will not mention them again. I don't
Not
think
beating the allegations.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think I've seen an all-time classic ad yet for sure. But we've got many more to go.
I
Mhm.
was going to say exactly what Tim said about Budweiser. That company won the USA Today ad meter last year with a Clydesdale ad that was far inferior to this year's Clydesdale ad. So I think that's going to do very well.
I want to end us out if each of you can think from our conversation today of one takeaway for marketers as they're looking forward at other campaigns they might be doing around either the World Cup or other kind of sporting event campaigns. What is like a lesson to take out from the trends or the factors you've described today?
For me, it would be kind of look big and small in sports. We talked earlier about supporting the individual creator athlete. I think that's a thing. I think it's also a thing that people's attention is getting bigger on sort of global sports. So F1, English Premier League, things that can kind of cross the globe. This is why you're seeing NFL going to playing games in Europe each year. And I think there's opportunity in the U.S. for games like rugby and like that coming to the U.S. So those are some of the spaces that can look.
Yeah, I would say, listen, we're going to see 1,700 celebrities during the Super Bowl. If you have a celebrity in your marketing, let's just try to make sure they work and there's a reason for them to be there. And then, think about the ecosystem beyond the Super Bowl as well. It's a really great space. It doesn't have to just all be about the end game spot. It can be about social. It can be about, wherever your content lives. Coors Light did this wonderfully last year in the Mischief campaign. They had billboards, they had content pieces that had nothing to do with their in-game spot that were really wonderful. So just build that ecosystem and make sure you have a celebrity that makes sense at the center of it.
Absolutely. Well, as everybody is getting ready for the big game to settle in for their, long schedule of Olympics event they might want to tune into, make sure to follow Ad Age on social media. You'll probably hear some from Tim, some from John, some from all of us. On social media, we'll have things like live voting during the Super Bowl and all sorts of stuff. So follow us there. And for sure, make sure you're following John and Tim's reporting, whether it's about these things or else I'm threatening people now or anything else because y'all are fabulous and we want to get everything you're writing. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks,
Always good to
Parker.
be here. Thank you, Parker.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Ad Age Insider as much as I did. If you liked it, consider following Ad Age wherever you're watching right now. If you have any ideas of what you would like me to ask Ad Age reporters about, send me an email at aapodcast@adage.com or send me a DM on LinkedIn. Thank you to my guests John Springer and Tim Nudd. Thank you for listening. Again, I'm Parker Heron, and this is Ad Age Insider. Enjoy your Super Bowl weekend.